Millionaire thought he married a disabled bride, until she stood up and shocked everyone. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The room is filled with warm light and polished wood, the kind of ballroom where every crystal chandelier whispers money and power. And at the front of it all stands Ethan Cole, a self-made millionaire with a tailored suit, a measured smile, and a mind already counting what this marriage will cost him and what it will save. He doesn't look nervous. He looks prepared, like a man signing a contract he's reviewed twice, because that's exactly what this is to him. A marriage of necessity. A signature required to unlock an inheritance clause his late father designed like a final test. Marry before 35, marry quietly, marry once. No scandal, no romance required, and certainly no surprises. Across the aisle sits the bride, Eleanor Gray, composed and silent in a white dress that pulls neatly around the wheels of her chair. She keeps her hands folded, her gaze lowered, absorbing the soft murmurs drifting through the guests like a low tide of pity. Ethan notices the looks. He notices everything. The investors in the second row who nod approvingly at his restraint, the distant relatives who lean in with sympathetic eyes, the whispered assumptions that this union will be simple, controllable, clean. A disabled bride, they think. A manageable wife. Ethan tells himself the same thing, not cruelly, but practically. He didn't choose her for love. He chose her because the arrangement promised no complications, no demands on his time, no expectations beyond the letter of the agreement signed weeks ago in a quiet law office downtown. 3 pages. Black ink. Clear rules. Separate lives. Public appearances as required. No emotional obligations. He remembers how calm she was that day, how steady her voice sounded as she agreed to every term without negotiation, without a flicker of hesitation. At the time, he took that calm for weakness, or resignation, or gratitude. Now, as the officiant clears his throat and the music fades, Ethan steps forward, ready to do what needs to be done. He reaches for the handle of the chair out of reflex, a practice gesture he learned for today, a symbol for the cameras and the family, a man doing the decent thing. His fingers hover inches away when he senses it, a shift in the air, a pause too long to ignore. Eleanor lifts her chin. The murmurs thin into silence. And for the first time since they met, she looks directly at him, not up, not down, but straight through him, calm and unafraid. Ethan feels a strange tightening in his chest, an irrational flicker of uncertainty he pushes aside, because this is just a formality, just another step toward closing a deal. He doesn't yet know that everything he believes about control, about weakness, about this woman and this marriage is about to be challenged in front of everyone who matters, and that the contract he thought would protect him is about to become the smallest thing in the room. After the brief pause at the altar, time seems to fold back on itself, and to understand why Ethan Cole is standing here at all, we have to step backward into the quiet weeks that led to this moment. Ethan has always believed that life is a series of problems meant to be solved, not felt. He grew up watching his father build an empire from nothing, learning early that emotions, slow decisions, and attachments create leverage for others to use against you. By the time Ethan took over the company, he had refined that lesson into a personal rule: control everything, especially himself. That is why the call from his father's attorney did not surprise him, only annoyed him. The inheritance clause was simple, almost old-fashioned. Marriage before 35, no public scandal, no divorce within 5 years. Fail, and a controlling share of the family trust would be redirected to a board that had never liked Ethan's leadership. He could fight it in court, but that would take time, invite scrutiny, and shake investor confidence. Or he could comply quickly and cleanly. That is when Eleanor Gray's name appeared in a carefully prepared file slid across a polished conference table. She was described in neutral, almost clinical language. Limited public presence. No immediate family leverage. Physical disability requiring a wheelchair. Educated, quiet, cooperative. The attorney emphasized the last word. Cooperative. Ethan remembers glancing at the photo attached to the file, noting her calm expression, the way she looked neither hopeful nor afraid. He assumed she would be grateful for stability, for protection, for the financial security his name alone could provide. He assumed wrong, but at the time, assumptions felt efficient. Their first meeting took place in a private lounge overlooking the city, 30 floors above the noise. Eleanor arrived early, already seated, hands resting lightly in her lap. She did not fidget. She did not avert her eyes. She listened as Ethan explained the arrangement with the same tone he used in board meetings, clear, precise, impersonal. He outlined the expectations, the boundaries, the duration. Separate bedrooms. No interference in business. Public appearances only when necessary. When he finished, he waited for questions, for hesitation, for negotiation. Eleanor gave him none. She simply nodded and said she understood. Her voice was steady, her words deliberate. She asked only one thing, a single clause added at the end. Complete privacy outside agreed events. No surveillance. No personal inquiries. Ethan agreed immediately, relieved by how uncomplicated it all seemed. He mistook her clarity for compliance. He mistook her silence for passivity. Over the weeks that followed, the arrangement unfolded exactly as planned. Legal documents were signed. Dates were set. Public statements were drafted. Eleanor attended fittings and consultations without complaint, without enthusiasm either. She never asked for upgrades, never pushed for changes, never leaned on him for reassurance. That restraint confirmed what Ethan already believed. This marriage would be quiet, predictable, contained. Yet there were moments, small and easily dismissed, that did not quite fit the narrative he had built. Once, during a rehearsal walkthrough, he noticed how Eleanor transferred herself with practiced efficiency when she thought no one was watching. Another time, during a planning dinner, she corrected a medical assumption made by a well-meaning coordinator with knowledge that sounded too precise, too informed. Ethan noticed, then dismissed it. Everyone has coping mechanisms, he told himself. Everyone adapts. He did not ask questions because questions invite complexity, and complexity was exactly what he had designed this marriage to avoid. For Eleanor, the weeks before the wedding felt very different. Every signature, every polite smile, every measured step toward the aisle was a test of discipline. She knew exactly what Ethan saw when he looked at her, and she allowed him to see it, because for now, it kept her safe. She followed the rules because the rules gave her cover. And as the wedding day approached, she prepared not for a role she intended to play forever, but for a moment she had chosen carefully, a moment that would decide whether this marriage remained a transaction or became something neither of them could control. To understand Eleanor Gray, you have to understand that nothing about her presence in that chair was accidental, and nothing about her silence was weakness. Long before her name appeared in Ethan Cole's file, Eleanor learned that visibility can be dangerous when power is involved. She was raised in rooms where decisions were made quietly and consequences were paid loudly. The daughter of a man whose fortune collapsed when he trusted the wrong partners and whose reputation never recovered. When the lawsuits ended and the cameras left, Eleanor was the one who learned how quickly the world stops listening once it decides who you are supposed to be. The injury came later, after a private accident that was dissected in headlines for a week and then forgotten, leaving behind assumptions that followed her everywhere. Doctors spoke to her slowly. Strangers spoke over her. Investors dismissed her entirely. During rehabilitation, she learned how to stand again, then how to walk, then how to do both without anyone noticing the effort it took. But she also learned something more valuable. She learned that people reveal their true character when they believe you are powerless. When the attorney approached her with the proposal, Eleanor recognized the shape of the trap immediately, and she stepped into it anyway, because for the first time, the terms worked in her favor. Ethan Cole did not want a partner. He wanted an answer to a problem. That made him predictable. The wheelchair became more than a symbol of recovery or limitation. It became a shield. It created distance. It discouraged curiosity. It lowered expectations. And lowered expectations give you room to see clearly. Eleanor read the contract with care, noting not just what was written, but what was missing. No clause about her autonomy outside appearances. No restrictions on her finances. No conditions about medical oversight. He had been so focused on protecting himself that he left her space to breathe. When she asked for privacy, she was not asking for kindness. She was securing freedom. In the weeks before the wedding, Eleanor played her role precisely, not out of deception, but out of choice. She allowed planners to move around her, allowed assumptions to pass without correction, allowed Ethan to believe the story he needed to believe. And yet, she paid attention to him in ways he never suspected. She noticed how he never raised his voice, but always controlled the room. How he listened just long enough to confirm his own conclusions. How his kindness was structured, efficient, and distant. She saw a man who believed that restraint was the same as morality and that control was the same as safety. It did not make him cruel, but it made him blind. Eleanor did not hate him for that. She understood it too well. There were moments when the mask almost slipped. Late at night, alone in the quiet apartment prepared for her, she practiced walking without support, counting her steps, steadying her breath, reminding herself why timing mattered. Once, when she caught her reflection in the mirror, standing unaided in a borrowed dress, she felt the weight of the decision she was about to make. Revealing the truth too early would change nothing. Revealing it too late would cost her everything. The moment had to be public. It had to be undeniable. It had to force a choice not just from Ethan, but from everyone watching. Because this was never just about whether she could stand. It was about whether anyone would stand with her once the illusion was gone. On the morning of the wedding, Eleanor woke before dawn and sat quietly as light crept across the room. She dressed herself slowly, deliberately, settling back into the chair with practiced ease when the assistants arrived. No one questioned it. No one imagined anything else. That was the point. As the ceremony approached, Eleanor felt no fear, only a steady calm born of preparation. She had already survived being underestimated. She had already rebuilt herself in silence. What came next was not a risk. It was a reckoning. And as the music began and the doors opened, she rolled forward not as a woman waiting to be chosen, but as someone who had already chosen when to. Stop pretending. In the days leading up to the ceremony, everything moves with polished efficiency, as if the wedding itself is determined to behave exactly the way Ethan Cole expects it to, clean and contained and free of friction. Yet beneath that surface, subtle cracks begin to form that he notices but refuses to name. Rehearsals take place in the same ballroom where he has closed acquisitions and announced earnings, and he treats them with the same detached focus, standing at his mark, nodding when prompted, mentally checking off tasks like a man preparing for a merger rather than a marriage. Eleanor remains beside him, composed, observant, saying little, doing exactly what is required and nothing more. To everyone else, she appears grateful and reserved, the quiet bride fortunate enough to be chosen by a powerful man. To Ethan, she remains an unknown variable he has already categorized and dismissed. And yet, there are moments that disturb that certainty. During one rehearsal, as assistants adjust the placement of chairs and flowers, Ethan notices Eleanor shift her weight in a way that looks too controlled, too practiced, as if the movement comes from habit rather than necessity. He tells himself he is overanalyzing, that years of leadership have trained him to look for weaknesses where none exist. Later, during a private fitting, he overhears her speaking with the tailor about fabric tension and balance, using language that suggests a deep awareness of posture and movement. Again, he dismisses it. People adapt, he reminds himself. That does not change the facts. The facts are written in ink and signed by both of them. As the wedding approaches, the social calendar fills with mandatory appearances, discreet dinners, and carefully staged photo opportunities meant to reassure investors and relatives alike. Ethan plays his role flawlessly, offering polite smiles and measured comments about partnership and stability, while Eleanor remains a quiet presence at his side, her expression serene, her answers brief and precise. Observers interpret her silence as shyness, even dependence. None of them notice how often she watches Ethan when she thinks no one is looking, not with longing, but with assessment, as if she is measuring the distance between who he believes he is and who he might become. At night, Ethan retreats into work, reviewing documents and emails, grounding himself in numbers and forecasts that make sense. Marriage, he tells himself, is simply another structure, another system that will hold if built correctly. Eleanor, in contrast, uses the quiet hours for preparation of a different kind. Alone, away from the eyes of planners and staff, She rehearses movements that must look effortless when the time comes, not dramatic, not defiant, just undeniable. She knows that spectacle would undermine her point. The power lies in calm. The power lies in certainty. She practices stopping, standing, breathing, reminding herself that timing is everything. The morning of the wedding arrives with clear skies and a sense of inevitability. The venue hums with controlled chaos as guests begin to arrive, their conversations filled with speculation and sympathy, admiration and curiosity. Ethan dresses in silence, his reflection in the mirror revealing a man confident in his plan, unaware that he is approaching a threshold he did not account for. When he steps into the ballroom, the familiar weight of expectation settles comfortably on his shoulders. This is his world. This is where he is strongest. Eleanor arrives shortly after, guided through side corridors, shielded from view until the moment demands it. As she is positioned at the back of the room, she feels no hesitation, only focus. The music begins softly, drawing attention forward, and the guests turn as one, ready to witness exactly what they expect to see. Ethan takes his place at the altar, posture straight, expression composed, prepared to complete the final step of a transaction he believes he understands. He does not notice the stillness spreading through the room as Eleanor begins to move forward, nor does he sense the shift that has already begun, because certainty, once settled, has a way of blinding even the most careful minds. And as the aisle stretches between them, every assumption Ethan has carried into this moment moves with her, closer and closer to the point where it will no longer hold. As Eleanor reaches the front of the room, the music softens into a low, sustained note, and the officiant offers a welcoming smile that falters just slightly when he notices the unusual stillness settling over the guests. This is the moment everyone has been waiting for, the point where expectation becomes ceremony, and Ethan Cole finally turns fully toward the woman he is about to marry. He sees her as he always has, seated, composed, framed by white fabric and careful arrangements, and his mind shifts automatically into procedure. He extends his hand toward the handles of the chair, prepared to guide her the final few feet as rehearsed, an act meant to signal dignity and consideration. The gesture is smooth, practiced, and entirely unexamined. Around them, the room holds its breath, cameras poised, whispers suspended in anticipation of a familiar tableau. Eleanor does not immediately respond. Instead, she looks at Ethan's hand for a brief moment, not with hesitation, but with recognition, as if acknowledging the role he is playing and the story he believes he is telling. Then she places her own hands lightly on the arms of the chair. The movement is small, almost invisible, yet something in it disrupts the rhythm of the ceremony. A ripple of unease passes through the first few rows as Eleanor straightens her back, her posture shifting from passive to deliberate. Ethan notices the delay and glances up, his expression tightening almost imperceptibly, unsure why the sequence has broken. The officiant clears his throat, prepared to continue, when Eleanor does something no one expects. She presses down, engages muscles long underestimated, and begins to rise. At first, the motion is so subtle that it reads as an adjustment, a reflex. Then the chair remains where it is as Eleanor lifts herself fully upright. The sound of the room changes instantly, a collective intake of breath replacing the earlier murmurs. Eleanor stands, steady and unassisted, her balance controlled, her gaze level. Time seems to fracture into fragments as guests exchange startled looks, disbelief flickering across faces that moments ago were composed with polite sympathy. Ethan freezes, his hand still extended toward a chair that no longer defines the woman in front of him. His mind scrambles for context, for explanation, for a version of reality that fits what he is seeing. This was not in the file. This was not in the contract. Eleanor takes a single step forward, then another, each movement measured in calm, not dramatic, not defiant, simply factual. The chair behind her feels suddenly irrelevant, an object stripped of meaning. The officiant falls silent. The cameras hesitate, then refocus, instinctively drawn to the truth unfolding without commentary. Eleanor stops in front of Ethan, close enough now that he can see the quiet certainty in her eyes, the absence of apology or fear. She does not speak. She does not explain. She does not ask permission. The message is carried entirely by the act itself. Ethan feels heat rise to his face, a sensation unfamiliar and unwelcome, as fragments of the past weeks reorder themselves in his mind. The efficient movements, the precise language, the moments he dismissed as anomalies. All of it converges here, leaving him exposed in a way no boardroom confrontation ever has. Around them, the guests struggle to reconcile what they thought they understood with what they are witnessing. Some lean forward. Others sit rigid, uncertain where to place their eyes. A few exchange glances heavy with judgment, not of Eleanor, but of Ethan, whose assumptions have been laid bare without a word. Eleanor's breathing is steady, her expression composed, as if she has simply corrected a misunderstanding that went on too long. In that silence, the ceremony ceases to be about vows or legality or obligation. It becomes a test, public and undeniable, not of her strength, but of Ethan's character. He is faced with a choice he did not plan for, one no contract can resolve, and the weight of it settles heavily between them as the room waits to see whether he will cling to the story he told himself, or finally confront the truth standing right in front of him. The silence that follows Eleanor's final step feels heavier than any sound, pressing down on the room until even the chandeliers seem to hold still, and for the first time in his life, Ethan Cole does not know what to do. His hand lowers slowly, fingers curling as if grasping for something solid in a moment that has suddenly lost its structure. He feels hundreds of eyes on him, not with admiration or expectation, but with scrutiny, and it unsettles him more than any hostile takeover ever has. Eleanor stands before him, no longer framed by sympathy or assumption, just a woman meeting his gaze with calm resolve, and the imbalance of power he relied on dissolves in an instant. The officiant shifts his weight, uncertain whether to proceed, retreat, or speak, while murmurs ripple outward as guests struggle to process what they have witnessed. Ethan hears fragments of whispered disbelief, feels the sharp awareness of board members calculating risk, of relatives reassessing motives, of investors questioning judgment. In that moment, the marriage stops being private and becomes public in the most dangerous way possible. Ethan clears his throat, intending to say something measured, something neutral, but the words do not come. His mind races through clauses and contingencies, through legal language that suddenly feels useless, because nothing in the contract accounts for this kind of exposure. Eleanor remains silent, allowing the weight of her action to settle, forcing the room to confront its own assumptions without offering comfort or explanation. Ethan realizes, with a sharp clarity that cuts through his confusion, that she has not embarrassed him by standing. He embarrassed himself by underestimating her. The truth lands slowly, then all at once, and with it comes a feeling he has avoided his entire life. Vulnerability. He straightens his posture, not out of authority, but necessity, and finally meets her eyes fully, seeing not a variable to be managed, but a person who chose this moment with intention. His voice, when he speaks, is quieter than the room expects, stripped of the confidence he usually wears like armor. He asks her, not accusingly, but carefully, why she did not tell him. Eleanor answers without raising her voice, without dramatics, explaining that she did not hide the truth to deceive him, but to understand him, to see how he treated someone he believed had no leverage. Her words are precise, not cruel, and each one lands exactly where it should. She tells him she wanted to know whether he valued dignity when there was nothing to gain from it. The room listens now, fully, the earlier shock giving way to an uncomfortable awareness that this ceremony has turned into a reckoning. Ethan absorbs her words, feeling the familiar urge to defend himself, to rationalize, to reassert control, and for the first time, he resists it. He understands that any justification would only confirm what she tested and proved. Slowly, deliberately, he turns toward the officiant and the guests, acknowledging the situation without denial. He admits that he entered this marriage for reasons that had nothing to do with partnership, that he believed predictability was the same as safety, and that he was wrong. The admission costs him something tangible, something he has guarded carefully for years, and the room senses it. He then turns back to Eleanor and does something unexpected, even to himself. He apologizes, not for being surprised, but for assuming. He tells her that whatever happens next will be her choice, not The contracts, not his family's, not the expectations of anyone watching. He reaches into the inner pocket of his jacket and removes the folded document that has governed everything until now, holding it out not as leverage, but as surrender. The guests watch in stunned silence as the agreement that brought them here loses its power in a single gesture. Eleanor looks at the document, then at Ethan, and in that exchange, something shifts, subtle but undeniable. The ceremony does not resume. The music does not restart. Instead, the moment expands beyond its script, forcing everyone present to witness not just a reveal, but a transformation that has only just begun. After the ceremony dissolves into an uneasy suspension, the guests are quietly guided away, leaving the grand ballroom emptier than it has any right to be after such a spectacle, and the silence that remains feels more intimate and more dangerous than the one before. Ethan and Eleanor find themselves standing several feet apart, no longer performers in a public test, but two people forced to confront the consequences of it. The doors close, muting the outside world, and for the first time since this arrangement began, there is nowhere left to hide behind procedure or expectation. Ethan breaks the quiet first, not with authority, but with a question that carries the weight of everything he failed to ask before. He wants to know whether any of it was real, whether the calm, the cooperation, the stillness were all part of a plan designed to expose him. Eleanor listens without interruption, allowing his words to find their end before she responds. She tells him that the truth is more complicated than a simple test or trick. She did not enter this marriage to humiliate him or to prove a point to an audience. She entered because she understood the rules of power too well to ignore an opportunity to redefine them on her own terms. She explains that she agreed to the contract because it gave her something she had been denied for years, control over how she was seen and when she chose to speak. The chair, she says, was not a lie. It was a boundary. It allowed her to exist without being interrogated, without being managed, without being reduced to what others thought she could or could not do. Ethan reacts instinctively, his voice tightening as he admits that he believed her limitations made the arrangement safer, cleaner, easier. The admission hangs between them, raw and uncomfortable. Eleanor does not soften in response. She steps closer, not to intimidate, but to be unmistakably present, and tells him that safety built on assumption is not safety at all. It is convenience. She challenges him directly, asking whether he would have chosen her if he believed she could stand beside him as an equal, not quietly behind him as a liability. The question lands with precision, forcing Ethan to confront a truth he has avoided since the beginning. He realizes that his confidence was never rooted in strength, but in control, and that control was only possible because he believed she had none. The realization is not sudden, but it is complete, reshaping how he understands every decision that led them here. He admits that he never considered what the marriage meant to her, only what it protected him from losing. The words taste bitter as he says them, because once spoken, they cannot be taken back. Eleanor listens, her expression steady, and then tells him that this is the moment that matters. Not the reveal, not the ceremony, not the contract. This is where intention becomes action. She tells him she does not want apologies designed to ease his conscience or promises made to salvage reputation. She wants honesty without negotiation. She wants to know whether he can accept a partner who will challenge him publicly and privately, who will not fit neatly into the image he prefers to project. Ethan feels the familiar urge to retreat, to regain control by setting terms, and again he resists it. He acknowledges that he does not yet know how to lead without assumption, but that he is willing to learn, even if it costs him comfort, even if it costs him the certainty he has relied on for so long. Eleanor considers him in silence, weighing not his words, but the shift beneath them. She tells him that she is not asking for love, not yet. She is asking for respect that does not depend on advantage. The tension between them sharpens, not with anger, but with possibility, as both understand that the marriage has reached its true turning point. What began as a transaction now demands a choice, and neither of them can walk away unchanged. The choice Ethan makes next does not come in the form of a speech rehearsed for damage control or a statement drafted by lawyers, but through a sequence of actions that unfold with deliberate clarity, each one stripping away the structure he once hid behind. He asks Eleanor to walk with him back into the adjoining hall where a small group of family members, board representatives, and legal counsel have been waiting, uncertain whether the marriage still exists or has already collapsed. The moment they enter, conversations fall silent, and every face turns toward them, searching for cues. Ethan does not squeeze Eleanor's hand for effect, nor does he place himself in front of her. He stands beside her, leaving space between them that signals equality rather than possession. He addresses the room plainly, acknowledging that the arrangement which brought them here was built on expedience, not partnership, and that he will not continue under terms that require anyone to diminish themselves for his convenience. He announces that the inheritance condition has been fulfilled in form, but that he is formally relinquishing the leverage it granted him, instructing his attorney to dissolve the agreement attached to it immediately, regardless of financial consequence. The reaction is immediate and uneven. Some object quietly. Others exchange alarmed glances. One board member speaks up, reminding Ethan of the risks, of market perception, of fiduciary duty. Ethan listens, then responds without defensiveness, stating that leadership rooted in fear of loss is not leadership at all, and that he will accept whatever outcome follows. He turns to Eleanor and makes his position unmistakable. The contract that defined their marriage is void, not because she exposed its flaws, but because it never honored her autonomy to begin with. He tells her that from this moment forward, she owes him nothing, not explanation, not forgiveness, not continuation. If she chooses to leave, he will ensure her privacy and independence without conditions. If she chooses to stay, it will be as a partner whose voice carries equal weight, publicly and privately. Eleanor listens carefully, aware that this is not the grand gesture many would expect, but something far more rare. A surrender without performance. She asks him one question in return, whether he is prepared to be challenged not once, but continuously, without retreating into authority or silence. Ethan answers honestly, admitting that he does not know if he will succeed every time, but that he will not hide behind control again. The room waits, tension sharpening as Eleanor considers what is being offered. She knows that walking away would preserve her dignity completely, and that staying would require trust that has not yet been earned. Finally, she speaks, not to the room, but to Ethan, stating that she will remain, not as fulfillment of a contract or symbol of redemption, but to see whether action will continue to match intention when no one is watching. She makes it clear that this is not forgiveness, but a beginning, conditional on respect that does not fluctuate with circumstance. Ethan accepts without negotiation. The legal team is dismissed. The audience disperses, carrying with them a story far different from the one they expected. What remains is not a completed marriage, but a recalibrated one, stripped of illusion and obligation, grounded instead in choice. As they leave the hall together, there is no applause, no announcement, no return of ceremony. Just two people stepping into uncertainty with eyes open, aware that what comes next will demand more than compliance. It will demand consistency, humility, and a willingness to be seen fully, not as roles, but as equals. Time does not resolve everything quickly, but it reveals patterns, and in the weeks that follow the wedding day that never quite finished, those patterns begin to tell a different story. Ethan and Eleanor do not announce anything to the public. There are no interviews, no statements crafted to redirect speculation. Instead, they return to their lives with a quiet recalibration that few notice at first. Eleanor moves through the world without the chair when she chooses, and with it when she prefers, no longer performing strength or limitation for anyone else's comfort. Ethan watches this without comment, learning in small, difficult moments how often he once measured worth through convenience. Their shared spaces change subtly. Meetings that once excluded her now include her voice, not as a courtesy, but as a contribution that alters outcomes. Decisions are slower, more contested, and unexpectedly stronger for it. Ethan begins to understand that leadership does not weaken when challenged, it sharpens. The inheritance clause fades into irrelevance as the company stabilizes not through control, but through credibility regained. Investors adjust. Boards adapt. The world moves on. What does not fade is the private shift between them. Trust builds unevenly, through consistency rather than confession. Eleanor does not test him again with grand reveals. She tests him in quieter ways, disagreeing openly in meetings, declining invitations that do not align with her values, choosing independence even when dependence would be easier. Ethan meets each moment imperfectly, but present, resisting the urge to retreat into authority when discomfort arises. Months later, on an ordinary evening free of ceremony, Ethan invites Eleanor to dinner without agenda or expectation. No photographers wait. No documents are prepared. They sit across from each other not as symbols of transformation, but as people who have learned how fragile and deliberate change must be. Ethan tells her that he no longer wants a marriage defined by survival or optics, but one defined by choice renewed daily. He does not ask for forgiveness. He asks for the opportunity to continue earning trust without shortcuts. Eleanor considers him carefully, not as a woman impressed by sacrifice, but as one who understands its cost. She tells him that she stayed not because he changed in a moment, but because he kept changing when no one was watching. She accepts his invitation, not as closure, but as commitment grounded in reality. Their marriage does not become perfect. It becomes honest. On the anniversary of that interrupted ceremony, they return to the same city, walking side by side through a space where assumptions once ruled. Eleanor pauses, standing freely, feeling the ground beneath her feet, aware of how far she has come without needing to prove it. Ethan stands with her, no longer shocked by strength he once misunderstood, but grateful for it. The story that began with a millionaire who thought he was marrying a disabled bride ends not with surprise, but with clarity. What shocked him was never her ability to stand. It was his realization that true partnership begins only when power steps aside and allows dignity to take its place. And in choosing each other without contracts or illusions, they discover that love built on respect does not need a reveal. It simply needs the courage to remain standing together.